Your mother sounds an awful lot like mine. So when my mother took me to therapy, I was 17 years old, and it was after I returned home, or social services made me go back home. And my aunt, I know, had a lot to do with my mother taking me to a therapist. I know that my aunt really pushed for that. My mother had to find a way to tank that therapy to make sure that it looked like I didn't want to go. So at my first therapy appointment, she sat next to me on the couch and she proceeded to smear campaign me to the therapist right in front of me, talking about how I had run away from home, how difficult I had been, how now I'm 17 and with a baby, and what I've done to the family, the whole 9 yards. And she went on and on and on. I sat there humiliated, ashamed, embarrassed, knowing now the therapist knows what a horrible person I am, just looking at the floor. The therapist, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes in, asked to speak to me alone. I didn't speak. She asked me questions, and I might have said something like no or yes or I don't know, that sort of thing. But I didn't speak because I was terrified and because I was sure that she thought I was a piece of garbage because my mother just told her so. I left that session and my mother's waiting for me, and we go home, and home. She goes back to her house and I go to where I was staying at that point. And then the next week rolls around, she picks me up for therapy, and on the way there, she's saying things like, I know that you were talking about me, and, I'm paying for this, and everything that you share, I'm going to know. The therapist is going to tell me everything. Now, the therapist did assure me that wouldn't happen, but that didn't matter to me, because my mother was the most powerful person in the entire universe. My mother had me convinced that if I didn't interact with my grandfather, the child molester, that he would have a heart attack and die. I believed that lie until I was 26 years old. So anything my mother said, I believed. Here we are driving up and she's going at me, and I'm actually gaslighting myself. I didn't say anything in therapy. This is what I'm thinking as she's going at me. And then I'm like, well, maybe I did. Maybe I did say something. Did I say she was mean or something? Because that would have been my go-to. Get to therapy. I'm silent. That's the last time I went. I imagine the therapist said, well, she won't talk or whatever. And my mother just painted it as she doesn't want to go, she's uncooperative, that whole thing. And of course it got dropped. People who abuse their children don't want their children to go to therapy and speak. They don't want to be outed. People who abuse their children, when those children grow up, they don't want them to go to therapy and heal, because they know that when we go and we begin healing, they're either going to have to come along with us and do the right thing and show up and be accountable for their behavior, or they're gone. And in my case, well, no secret. My mother, it's been 30 years, but for a few slips here and there, because she used the I love you, I miss you words, and I'm not susceptible to that anymore. But it's been more than 30 years that I haven't had any sort of real relationship with my mother. And when I did have a real relationship with her, that really just means that we were interacting and she was abusing. So we never actually had a real relationship. We had perpetrator, victim, and survivor.